Okay, so I'm gonna kick us off here with just, for those of you who are new, this is your first event you're attending of the Sacramento Women in Leadership. Give you a little bit background about our club. We were founded at the end of winter quarter last year, so we've officially been running for about a year now. And our goal is to provide networking and social opportunities for everyone in the GSM with an emphasis on advancing and empowering women. And I'm the current president. I am Kelly. I'm a second year, but I'm a year and a half. I'm accelerating. So I wanted to say before we really get started that I am really grateful for my board that we've had for the past year. Natalie, Kristen, Sumeda, and Anna. Corey also, who is graduated, she was a co-founder. I could not have had such an amazing first year of the club without these women who stepped up to bat right away after our first event. Was like, I want to get involved. So I just want to shout out to them and really I thank them. And although we never got to do anything in person, I'm hoping to attend events maybe next fall in person. So just a shout out to them. I really want to really thank them for all of their hard work and efforts for this club. And I'd like to officially introduce next year's president, Sumeda, and she is going to lead us in tonight's event. So I will turn it over to Sumeda.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much. And I am so glad that you and Corey set up the Women in Leadership Sacramento Club last year. And it's been amazing. And I've really enjoyed working with you and Corey and Natalie and Kristen and Anna. And really excited to come, have our new board come in. But I think this team has a lot to be proud of for what we've accomplished in the middle of a pandemic. We've put together 2 speaker series. We've had networking session, and we've even had a virtual yoga session. So all that in the middle of a pandemic. In addition, I think our team has set up a really strong base that we're going to build on in this coming year, which includes like we came up with our strategic plan. We have our little reference documents, SOPs, and we even got membership input back in the fall. And this was one of the events that actually came from that input. Also, we've collaborated with the other Women in Leadership chapters in San Ramon, and now they're and the full-time program. So that's been very exciting as well. So a lot to be proud of. And with that, I wanted to introduce our new board, and we're going to build on all the work that this board has done. I wanted to introduce our vice president. And as I say your name, if you can do your hand up or whatever reaction you want on the Zoom reactions. Our vice president in this coming year is going to be Tegpreet Aluwalia. I don't know if she's here. Let me check. Oh, there she is. Okay, hi, Tegpreet. Our director of marketing will be Brooke Herevia. Is Brooke here? Hi, Brooke. And director of programming, Marie Putnam. Marie, hi. And we will also have Director of Membership for our 2020 cohort will be Margaret Meg Lee. Is Meg here? No? Okay, well, she's going to be one of our Director of Membership. And for our 2019 cohort year, we're going to have Marielle Berman. Marielle, are you here? I see you. Hi, Mario. And our cross-campus liaison will be Baldeep Rai. Baldeep, are you here? I see you. Yeah, hi. And our director of finance will continue to be Anna Gordon-Lopez. I believe, Anna, are you here? She might be. Okay. Okay, well, just wanted to welcome the class of our new board. And with that, I wanted to introduce our speaker for tonight, our very own Professor Pontikes. We're very excited to have her here presenting to us on leading from where you are. a little bit about Professor Pontikes. She is an associate professor of management at UC Davis since 2019. She was formerly on the faculty of the University of Chicago Booth School of Business as an associate professor and as a visiting associate professor at the Kellogg School of Management. She studies strategy in dynamic markets, focusing on category strategy and innovation to effect market change. Prior to academia, she developed sales strategies and competitive positioning at software startups. She's the former director of solution engineering at Core Metrics Inc. in California, which was acquired by IBM, and former program manager at MicroStrategy Inc. She has earned a Bachelor of Science degree magna cum laude in physics with distinction from Yale and her PhD in business administration from Stanford Graduate School of Business. Professor Pontikes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me here. It's nice to see all these faces. Hi to everyone from last year. It's nice to see you here, and everyone from this year. I've had a lot of you in my classes, and I cannot believe this club just started last year. So congratulations on starting this up. You know, I'm new here, so this is a very important club, and I'm really glad you guys are doing this and bringing all these people in. So I appreciate coming in. So the topic for today is leading from where you are, conveying yourself as a leader in any role within your organization. So when I was talking to Samita about what I would talk about, she said you guys had talked about a few things that would interest you. And I really like the idea of this topic, leading from where you are. Leadership is essential, of course, and the topic you chose indicates that leadership is required not only after you're in a leadership position, but you have to exhibit leadership to get into a leadership position. Okay, so that's inherent in leading from where you are. And so I thought, well, this is an interesting topic. Let's take a step back. And in order to lead from where you are, you need to know who you are and where you are. So who am I? What kind of leader am I? Who am I, first of all, before we can understand what kind of leader am I? And where am I? And then maybe where am I going? So I'm going to start with who you are and where you are, which are actually fundamental to leadership principles. And we'll talk about those and main research to understand how you can lead where you are. And then I will link that to literature about gender in leadership, since we're in the Women in Leadership Club, and you know, even if we weren't, that's always important. And then I'll also talk a little bit about leadership in the remote work environment, since it's relevant to us right now. And I think will continue to be relevant because as we're all starting to realize more and more, the lessons we're learning from how we're working now are going to extend even as we come out of the pandemic. Okay, so let's start with who are you? I'm going to start with the book that's familiar to you, the book Execution by Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan. They have a chapter on leadership. It's where they start. Okay, it's about execution, it's about strategy, but in order to do any of that, we have to lead. And they outline 7 essential characteristics of a leader, which I think are all important. But the most important one they have, it's the last one that summarizes, and it's called Know Yourself. Okay. And this does not start with personality characteristics, although we'll get to that. We'll get to your personality. But the foundation of knowing yourself is emotional fortitude, which is an essential building block to becoming a leader. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, emotional fortitude allows you to be honest with yourself, deal honestly with others, and face realities in an authentic way. So, and to be forthright in your interactions. And all of this is essential for leadership. People who do not have emotional fortitude are going to have a difficult time facing uncomfortable realities, having difficult conversations, interacting with people whose viewpoints are different from theirs. And we know all of this is essential to make the kinds of changes that need to be made and to integrate information and to learn, which are important for a leader, okay? So a lot of times people think a leader has to know everything beforehand. No one really thinks that, but people act as if that's the case. So as if learning is going to somehow undercut your authority. And emotional fortitude is essential for feeling confident in yourself so that you can take in that information without feeling threatened. Okay, so how do we get this? it comes from self-discovery and self-mastery. So a good leader understands her strengths and her weaknesses so she can build on her strengths and correct for her weaknesses. 4 qualities. 1 is authenticity. So the core of authenticity means that the outer person that you are projecting matches the inner person who you are. Anyone where there's some kind of disconnect between that, we can tell immediately. That's the idea of being a fake, okay? Now there's a few things with this. 1, someone who doesn't have these other aspects of leadership that we'll go through may feel like they have to project something different than who they really are to be a leader. So what we're going to learn is, how do you build on the authentic and important pieces of yourself to lead in your own way, okay? And if there's something inner that you need to hide, then there's something else you need to work on. But you're not going to be able to exhibit true leadership without projecting authenticity. So you're not putting on a mask, you're real. The second is self-awareness. You are comfortable with your strengths and not crippled by your weaknesses. No one's happy with their weaknesses. They can't be crippling to you. So you understand what your strengths are and you build on them. You also understand what your weaknesses are and you're able to work through them to introduce elements into your sphere that help you work through the weaknesses and help compensate for them. Compensate's not a great word, so I'm looking for something else. But that you understand what they are and that you're facing them, okay? So you're able to acknowledge and learn from your mistakes to grow. Self-mastery, slightly different than self-awareness. You take responsibility for your behavior, you adapt to change, embrace new ideas, and adhere to standards of honesty and integrity. So this is the key to true self-confidence, being authentic and positive. So not a self-confidence that masks an insecurity. Okay, so that's where you have this disconnect with authenticity. A self-confident person understands what they don't know, is willing to learn, and they can engage with someone at a real level to focus on the problem, not focusing on managing the ego. Okay, so this is where leadership gets stunted because you cannot engage and you cannot learn. So when you encounter a problem, you don't blame others or claim victimhood, you learn how to fix it. The last is humility, knowing how to contain your ego, being realistic about your problems, admitting when you don't know all the answers. Also, the pairing of humility is asserting yourself when you are confident in your opinion, but not gloating. I'm going to return to these. These are very important, but we are going to have to think about these through a gendered lens as well, okay? Because a lot of this advice about taking responsibility for your mistakes and things like that, yes, they're important, but some people are farther along that spectrum than others. And what we know with gender is that women may be too willing to take responsibility for mistakes that aren't theirs, okay? So this is part of the self-awareness and emotional fortitude, is understanding what your weaknesses are, but you also understand what they're not, okay? So that you're not kind of bullied into taking responsibility for things that aren't your responsibility. So we have this flip side. So we can see in the execution book, they're kind of speaking to the male aspiring to be a leader. And now this is a generalization, not all, okay? But the typical problem here is going to be too much ego. Whereas for some women, the problem will be not enough, okay? So emotional fortitude is recognizing who you are and understanding yourself at a very deep level. Every person needs emotional fortitude and to know themselves in order to lead, okay? But emotional fortitude is not personality. So we're going to get to personality, and all spectrums of personality can lead if you understand yourself and have emotional fortitude. So once you develop this, then you understand your personality, you know yourself, and you see how you can develop as a leader to be strong, authentic, and connect with others. And we'll get to different leadership practices. Okay, so personality. Now, you guys have probably, how many people have heard of the Big Five? You've all heard of the Big Five. How many people have really engaged with the Big Five personality characteristics? Not a ton. Okay, some people have. So if you're taking a leadership class, including some of our leadership classes, you'll take like a Big Five personality test. The Big Five, this is not like, it's not like gravity like that exists, right? It's a framework, it's a construct, it's helpful. So there's 5 traits that generally can capture aspects of people's personalities and how they're different. We're going to talk through these to understand where you're coming from so that you can understand what foundation you have that you'll be able to build out leadership in a comfortable way. I do not know if I encourage you to take a personality test. I know some of our classes take the tests, and the tests are fine. They can be very, very useful if you use it to try to understand yourself more and figure out where you're trying to go. What sometimes happens with the tests, no matter how much we give the kind of lecture that I'm going to give you right now, is that people use them to diagnose whether or not they are a leader. Okay, and where this comes from is because there is a stereotype of a leader in our society that is not the only way to lead. It's one way to lead. It's not the only way to lead. And no matter what I'm going to tell you, that stereotype will get activated. And when you see your personality traits not fitting in with that stereotype, then you think, I'm not a leader. And so it can become counterproductive to take that kind of test sometimes. So I probably would not administer it. Some people do, and taking a test can be helpful. Okay, so as long as you use the information in a way that helps you but doesn't constrain you. Because part of becoming a leader is you need to open your possibilities and expand your horizons to understand what are all the possibilities you can go to given who you are. How can you grow into your best self? Okay, kind of can sound a little hokey, but that's kind of where we're going. All right, so take the leadership test if you think it'll help you that way. Don't take it if you don't think it'll help you. And in general, people know their personality. You don't necessarily need a test. So I'll tell you the characteristics and you'll probably identify with who you are. And if you can't do that, cycle back to emotional fortitude. You need to understand yourself better, okay? And if you can't do that by just understanding it, you're probably not going to answer the questions in an authentic way anyway, okay? So I don't think you necessarily need the test. But these personality characteristics are important to think about where you can go in order to understand what kind of leader that you could develop into productively. Okay, so one is openness to experience. And what does that do for leadership? Well, if you're leading change or integrating diverse opinions or bringing a lot of people together or trying to connect with a number of people who you're trying to lead who have different perspectives, openness to experience is very helpful, okay? Because it can, it's a sort of natural tendency you have that will help you connect in those situations. However, there's always a flip side, okay? So in contexts where risk is bad, in contexts where you have to make a decision and move, there's all these possibilities, fine, we have to pick one. Openness to experience can hold a leader back. Conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is great because you're detail-oriented and you have all the parts put together. Conscientiousness will be very helpful in your early career. A lot of you've been successful, you're probably very conscientious and it's serving you well right now. Sometimes you need to pull that back as you grow because you do not want conscientiousness to turn into micromanagement, perfectionism, and also the inability to draw out of people what's best in them. Okay, because it can get you to pick on them if you're too conscientious about the project or the outcome. But conscientiousness can still be good and translate into good things in terms of empowering people in the sense of if you can reframe conscientiousness into being conscientious about developing another person's abilities, okay? So we start to think about as you're growing in your career, right now you're conscientious about a task perhaps that's given to you, that's gonna help. But as you move up the ladder, you need to be able to work with other people's styles and understand where they're coming from, and it can get in the way sometimes, okay? So that's something to watch out for as you're growing. Okay, extroversion. I think people are a little more aware of the kind of double-sided nature of extroversion. Our modern conception of a leader is this like self-promoting extrovert, able to connect, talk to people, a good public speaker, okay? And so this is one of the fallacies I was talking about where people who are like high on introversion can feel like they're not going to be a good leader. It's actually interesting because if you go back to the 1800s, that is not the quality of a leader, okay? People would not even like put themselves out there for a political position. It was considered like in very poor taste to be like self-promoting yourself. So a true leader was very humble and kind of they would always do their things, right? They would have agents in their place, making statements for them, but it wasn't the same kind of idea that we have now. That is not like a universal idea that extroversion is better for a leader. And we also know in the research that introverts have characteristics that can make them very good leaders. So often extroverts will be someone who people will initially look to as a leader. But often what can happen is that they kind of seem better when they first are talking than they end up being, okay? Or the expectation is higher than the execution. Introverts have strong leadership qualities in terms of listening, in terms of listening to subordinates, collecting relevant data, and being more reflective before making a decision. That's all very important for leadership, okay? So not to say extroverts cannot be a good leader, but we have two sides again. So then we're thinking about, okay, what type of leader can I be? Okay, agreeableness is great for building relationships. This is probably obvious, the two sides. If you have too strong a need for agreeableness, you will not be able to make the hard decisions. You'll not be able to have productive confrontation, okay, if you're prioritizing agreeableness and the personal relationship over what needs to get done. Okay, and then the last one, this is probably the most concerning of neuroticism. People who score high in neuroticism often get very anxious about scoring high on neuroticism. You know, you knew that you would and you did, and oh my God. Okay, neuroticism can conflict with that emotional fortitude we talked about, which you need to have. You need to manage that. But people who score high in neuroticism, there's starting to be more research on this. So this is going to be helpful to you. I know there are some here. And the reason I know there are some here is because neuroticism is functional in some ways. So if you can channel your anxiety to something that's productive, okay, so that perfectionism, which can come from neuroticism, can be problematic, but perfectionists actually do better on a lot of things because of these standards, okay? So there's things that you can accomplish with neuroticism if you channel it in a productive direction. And so there was some research that there's like a healthy neurotic, which is high conscientiousness and high neuroticism. So a person who's high in neuroticism can be a very effective leader at actually getting things done, even if they're not necessarily popular. So, I mean, I can't psychologically analyze anyone, but like the downside of Steve Jobs sounds like a little bit of neuroticism at least, right? And people had kind of conflicted feelings about him. They said he made us be a better leader. He made us be better, but you know, there were some interpersonal problems. Okay, so if you're high in neuroticism, don't worry. That's something that you need to know. That's fine. Make sure you have emotional fortitude. Make sure you manage that and channel it in a productive direction. Okay, so there we are with leadership characteristics and who are you? Okay, so we understand I need to develop emotional fortitude. Oh, I skipped an important part of this. Developing emotional fortitude, how do you do it? So make sure you know you have it. Life coaches, career coaches, therapy, old-fashioned therapy, understand yourself, okay? And the ability to reflect, meditation, mindfulness, this all develops emotional fortitude. It will make you a healthier person too. You'll understand yourself. And that's where you need to have that foundation to be able to lead. So invest in that. I was gonna say this is a good time to do it. I know I have a child. It's not a good time to do anything, so I won't say that. But you know, if you do have a little extra time. Okay, the second thing is where are you? So we've covered knowing who you are. The next is where are you? I will start again with Bossity and Sharon. Know your people and know your business. Another big element of leadership. This seems obvious when we say it, but we see a lot of leaders who don't know their business and they just think like, oh, I'm just going to lead from the force of my personality. No. Okay, you have to be a good leader, but you also have to lead in what you're doing. You have to understand what you're doing. So an effective leader has to be where the action is and intimately understand the business. This does not mean you're intimately doing everything in the business. You're not micromanaging, but you understand it at a deep level. How does that present, given that you're managing a group? Well, it presents in asking the questions, engaging, understanding what the issue is and what they're trying to solve. So when you know the business really well, you can understand and you can pinpoint where the difficulty will be and then help them out of it. And that's the role of the leadership, facilitating, bringing out what people need to understand. Okay, so you need to know your business, and if you don't know your business, you have to learn your business. And you guys, for those of you who took my class, most of you did, we have a lot of good examples of leaders. They get it on the ground floor and they learn. Okay. Oh, for those of you who took my class, Tony Hsieh, a great example of an introvert who's a very strong leader. Okay. All right. So next we'll turn to exhibiting leadership to advance. So a lot of you are probably either managing teams or and wanting to advance from there, or maybe you're not even there yet. So maybe you're looking to advance and you're just a strong contributor, and you are a strong contributor at your company. Okay, so what you want to do if you want to take on more formal responsibilities, the best way to do that is to exhibit the leadership from the place you're in. So that means you don't only work toward accomplishing what you're supposed to do, but you take on with initiative the responsibilities at the level that you want to be leading at. Now, there's a caveat to this. You don't step on toes. You don't undermine your boss. Okay, that will be seen as not a team player. We don't want to do those things, but you want to be thinking about what the issues are confronting people in the position where you want to be. Okay, thinking about those and then cultivating ideas, including a full package of solutions that you can promote. That shows leadership, full ownership, okay? Taking ownership from what I'm presenting. So you understand the business, you know where you are, and you're studying, well, what probably are the problems that the people 1 or 2 levels above me are looking at, okay? And you have conversations, you listen, you observe, you have, you present maybe some ideas, and you interpret the reactions carefully because you have emotional fortitude, and you cycle, okay? You don't keep pushing, you're like, this is a great idea, and your manager's like, no. There could be a few reasons for that. 1, your manager doesn't have vision. Your manager doesn't have leadership. Okay, that's important for you to know, but you don't keep pushing in that direction, you go in a different direction. 2, you might have read the situation incorrectly. So you cycle back, and then you keep moving forward, okay? So think about, okay, where do I want to go in the organization I'm in or wherever next you would like to go in your career path? And what would be an idea? What would I like to do? Where would I like to start up? What do I see as a problem in the business, okay? And then identify a solution. You will not be helpful and you will be a pest if you're just like, here are all the problems. Okay, no one wants to hear that. But if you say like, listen, I saw there's an issue here with maybe how this client is being dealt with. And I think we could deal with it if I took on this project and there's some extra resources here and I have solved your problem. That's what you want to do. Not dumping a problem in your superior's lap, dumping a solution in your superior's lap. Some people don't want solutions, okay? So what you also have to understand are who are your supporters and how can you get ideas and progress for where you want to go, okay? So there are a few things to think about here. The first is your manager a leader? Is your manager influential? Is your manager respected? Okay, if the answer to any of those are no, you've got to figure a way around the manager without confronting, okay? So if the manager is not a leader, not respected, not influential, you can have the best idea in the world. The manager won't know how to sell it, won't know who to sell it to, et cetera, et cetera. 2, is your manager supporting you? Okay. And if that's not true, they're not going to help you either, maybe for other reasons. 1, maybe you don't click. Okay, fine, it's not personal. 2, maybe your manager is threatened by, this would be not a good leader, but threatened by promising people below them, okay? That happens a lot. So sometimes if you have a really good idea, a good manager you want to cultivate as a leader, you say, hey, that's great. You win, I win. Some people aren't like that. And they're like, oh, I don't want this person to pass me up through the hierarchy. Okay. So that's not a good way to be. It won't be good for the organization. And ultimately, it probably won't be good for your manager's career, but maybe some people get through with that and that's fine. It's not a just world all the time, but you need that information so you can incorporate it to figure out your strategy. Okay. So if the manager is not helpful, you've got to figure out who is. So what you need to figure out are what are your informal ties in the organization, how you can cultivate and tap them to build your network inside and outside the organization. And you have to do it without looking like you're undercutting the hierarchy so even if your manager is incompetent, it won't look good if you're you look like you're trying to circumvent them, okay? And so this takes some finesse, and you have to understand the culture of your organization too. So I can't give you like general advice for this, except really do observation and be very careful at the beginning when you're first taking steps this way. Maybe even run it by your manager first. Just be like, oh, you know, this person I thought was doing some interesting stuff. I thought I would connect with them. Just a personal thing. Or, hey, you know, I'd be really interested in like your advice about, you know, something outside about your career, let's say, but outside your direct job. Just something that is not threatening, but builds a relationship. So what you want to do is identify people who think like you, who have the potential to support your ideas. You won't know this until you meet them. So you have a lot of lunches, you have a lot of coffees. And you meet people where you could kind of plant little seeds and get yourself moving up through the organization. Okay, so you sometimes need to do this stuff. We've learned from my class that good organizations will have pathways for this. A lot of organizations don't, and you have to forge your own. And this is the way to do it. So you see if the formal hierarchy works. If it doesn't, okay, then you take a different path. Okay. And also outside your organization, sometimes, well, like you guys are here in the Women in Leadership Club, sometimes there'll be some kind of like external event that you can get involved with that will help your career, but it's not within the organization. So think about all of those avenues. Okay. So that is leading from where you are, both in terms of the business you're in and where you are kind of hierarchically or in terms of your career progression within that business. Okay, next is situational leadership. So finding a leadership style that fits your personality and also where you want to go. Okay, so you're not pigeonholed into a personality, but what's the trajectory for growth that you want to embrace? Okay, so there's some research, and this is pretty good. Okay, there's 5 general styles of leadership that people have found that can be effective in different situations. So in terms of leadership style, you have to find a style or a set of styles really that work with your personality so that you can be authentic with those. You have emotional fortitude with that style, and that can match different situations. Okay, so some styles match some situations, some styles match others, some styles match some personalities, some match others. So you've got to figure out what you can do. And ideally you have some kind of repertoire, right, of different styles that you're cultivating that you can use in different situations. Okay, and I sent out Sumita a little kind of cheat sheet with the 7 essential behaviors, the personality styles, the big 5 characteristics. So if you're not running these, I should have said that before, you don't have to write all of these down, and I have the sites that you can look into later. Okay, so the first is aversive. Threats, intimidation, punishment. Okay, so this is sort of like the archetype of a leader, but everyone kind of knows it's not real leadership, okay, or it's not the best in all situations. Okay, so the advantages are it communicates seriousness in extreme situations. Sometimes you need to do it. You got to drop, hey, this has got to happen, especially if someone is being hostile and time is of the essence. The disadvantages are it's not very flexible. You have high personal dissatisfaction and inability to learn. People are too fearful of you. Okay, so typically this would be for, high stress situation, something comes up and needs to be acted on right away. But it typically is not a good leadership style to do in an ongoing sense. The second one is directive, which is like what you could do in an ongoing way in situations where some people could be aversive. So this is directions, instructions, command. So this is kind of like a top-down leadership. And it's kind of how management was thought of in like the 1920s, right? When people were first studying managers, that you're just going to tell people what to do and they're going to do them. Okay, so advantages are it's good when followers are experienced or low skilled and when the goals are clear. So you have a clear set of directions, people do it, okay? And it's good if the people who are doing it want to have directions and want to learn what to do. There are some people who don't want a lot of responsibility for making the decisions. You go to work, you get paid, you come home. All right, fine. The disadvantages are low flexibility, low opportunities for the leader to learn and grow. Okay, so this would be in a situation where there's not a lot of learning that's probably going to happen and you really want to just get something done and you don't want to be aversive. There's transactional, rewards for compliance. Advantages are there's very clear alignment if people like their jobs, want the rewards, and the leader has control. Okay, so you get this bonus if you do X. Great. The disadvantages are it can cause competitive behavior between employees, and it can reduce innovation and citizenship behavior. Okay, and we talked about this, when we talked about metrics in the strategy course, and how compensation works, because sometimes if you're only doing something for compensation, it undermines doing anything you're not compensated for. Okay, but that's a fair style. Okay, then we get into more popular modern leadership styles. So transformational charismatic. So this is creating a highly motivated vision. Advantages are this is really good in a crisis when you need a team effort and just motivates people and inspires them to do something bigger than themselves. And it kind of communicates kind of a number of things in one general vision, if you could get the vision right. The disadvantages is it can be hard to sustain long-term. So this can be good leadership for some points of transition, so, some kind of time of change. And then there's empowering, which is the most sort of trendy leadership style, which is like leading others to lead themselves. And so it leads to long-term innovation advantages. If your workers are self-motivated and skilled, it requires less oversight. The disadvantages is it's not good if employees are not that experienced, and it can lead to confusion. Okay, so we have these 5 leadership types, and some situations call for different leadership styles. So the best you can, develop as many of these as you can, okay? And some of them won't work for your personality, so it has to work for both. You need to constantly reassess situations and be ready to adapt with a different style. And the last thing that's very important is you need to understand when your style is not appropriate for the situation, when you don't have that leadership style. So an example, like Winston Churchill was the right leader to get the British through World War II. He was not the right leader after World War II. Okay, too much inversive style, it didn't work. Okay, same guy, but he left office. For those of you who know history, the British history, after he left office not successful. Okay, even though he was highly successful at getting the British through the war. Okay, so next we have, we'll have about 15 minutes for questions, 12, 15 minutes. Gender and leadership. So gender has a strong influence on leadership behaviors, how they are perceived, and how effective they are. And also how, because of those things mostly, how much women want to exhibit certain leadership behaviors, all right? So fundamentally, the challenge women face are that stereotypes for the ideal leader in some ways are in direct conflict with stereotypes for femininity, okay? So being an ideal woman and being an ideal leader are not the same. There's not a lot of like overlap in that Venn diagram. And it can lead to women who exhibit leadership characteristics being perceived as less likable. And also it can lead to, even if you exhibit the same leadership characteristics, them not being as effective because they're read in a hostile way. Okay, so there's perception and effectiveness. In terms of perception, it means that women face a larger trade-off than men in terms of being seen as a leader and being liked. And then effectiveness is that there is a practical limitation. You're using the same toolbox, the same repertoire of leadership skills, and they're less effective for a woman than they are for a man. Okay, so there's going to be some things that are just, I don't want to be downer. The gaps are closing and things are getting better. Okay. What that means is that in recent surveys, a little over half the population is indifferent to having a woman leader versus a man leader. Just a little over half, which means that almost half don't prefer a man. Okay, so it's getting better. There's still challenges. What does this mean for you? Well, first, understanding the many roles of leaders. So I'll start with the positive, but I'm not going to be all positive. It drives me crazy. It's like there are some real challenges and real trade-offs. Okay, so and leaning in will only take you so far. Lean in, but it's not all. The personal solution to this problem is not enough. Okay, so I'll just say that right there. I think it can feel like it's like an aggression kind of to be blamed and that you're not taking enough responsibility when it's really the outside world that's the problem. Okay, but so what can you do? Understanding the many roles of leadership and that there are many options, okay? So understanding your personality, where you can go, and that there's all these different styles of leadership can help, okay? So understand that and try to cultivate as much as possible. At some level, there are trade-offs. You're going to have to decide between being your need to be liked, like what makes you fulfilled. Okay, so how much is the leadership? How much do you want to be liked? What it takes to make you happy. All right. So next, the emotional fortitude will help a lot. So remember I talked about like, we come back to the beginning. We'll get back to the so it'll allow you to be perceptive if you have emotional fortitude about when criticisms are about you. So women face an extra burden, like the criticism, it's like, and people of color face an extra burden even in addition, that you don't really know is this really a problem with me? Or is it a problem with you, right? So there's a higher, it's always like that with everyone. You always have to filter, but there's a higher level of filter where you're like, I don't know. Like, how should I interpret this? I don't want to ignore real criticism. I want to grow from it, but like maybe the problem's not with me, okay? So emotional fortitude will help you filter through that. It's still an additional burden to have to do that filter, okay? But that's where we are. Okay, so when is it a weakness you need to address? When is it gendered? And when is it both, okay? Because the other thing is like, your weaknesses will be amplified. And so it's like, yes, that is a weakness. Yes, that's something I have to address, but wait, what about X, Y, and Z who no one's mentioning these weaknesses? Okay, the internalized stereotypes, we have to come back to these in terms of what you need to work on to be a leader, okay? So we talked about all the stuff at the beginning. So I want to revisit some gendered issues in terms of the emotional fortitude lessons. So taking responsibility. A true leader takes responsibility. A true leader does not take excessive responsibility. You take appropriate responsibility. So you don't take responsibility for things that aren't your fault. That's not leadership. So it's not that you take more and more and more responsibility, okay? So this is where emotional fortitude helps you filter what is my responsibility. So women are more likely to and more expected to, they go hand in hand, take more responsibility for the mistakes and less responsibility for the successes, okay? So make sure that you're calibrating that because that will project the leadership. All right. So don't take excessive responsibility for the mistakes. And there's sometimes this sort of like a silence of people wanting you to jump in and just learn to be comfortable with silence. All right. Someone says something and you're not sure how to respond. Like, well, I didn't really like your tone. Okay, they'll be uncomfortable with the silence and then they'll feel like they have to follow up. So you guys are all pretty uncomfortable, right? Like, oh God. And so they'll be like, well, what I mean is blah, 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 blah. Okay, silence is useful there. Just a little tactic. Okay, so don't take excessive responsibility. Ego and humility. You don't want to have too much of an ego, but women are more likely to be assigned more egos. So sometimes when you're like, well, I think this really needs fixing. So it's like, well, it's all about your ego. It's like, what? Like, where did that come from? You know what? My sister, she's a partner at a law firm. And she was on a case with two men, and the judge was like, all right, but don't get so emotional. And the two men who were her partners were like, what is he talking about? Why do you think we were emotional? This is crazy. And she's like, oh yeah, that's just gendered. They always say that to me, and it was like just shocking to them that someone would say this. So, okay, so be aware of ego and humility. Also be aware that you may be excessively assigned that. And so just because someone else thinks you're not humble enough and don't have enough ego, that you have to draw inward to understand that. Okay, and then also agreeableness. So the reality is you're gonna have to just push through at some level, not being liked as much as someone else who might exhibit those characteristics. So this is where I hate to be, I don't know if there's not a win-win to all of these, okay? So sometimes you just have to kind of figure out where you're going. But I will say, once you push through, it gets easier. I remember my mom telling me when I was younger, she was like, some women say like they want to be a secretary so they can find a husband, but I find that the farther up you go, the more people want you. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like she told me that when I was like 5, and it's true. It's like, she said like they work so hard against you that you're not going to get there. But once you're there, everyone's like, oh, wow. So sometimes you got to just push through it to get to the point where you need to be, and then things change. Okay. So try to keep the end game in mind. All right, that's my advice, partly coming from research, partly coming from experience. The last one is leading in remote work. And for this, Seidal Neely from Harvard Business School has done a lot of interesting work on leadership. She has a book coming out in March. And she has been studying leading a remote global workforce for years. So she is at the right place at the right time. And she had a few really interesting comments. Actually, she's a very great leadership speaker. Look up some of her videos, really interesting. Okay, she said first, if you're leading remote teams, you have to trust people. And then she quotes Hemingway, the best way to find out if you can trust someone is to trust them. You have to trust them. If they don't work out, you follow through, you take action if you need to, okay? But you can't have, she said, you have to just give up on that heavy monitoring of the team, okay? So this is true under the conditions we're in, and it will also be true when we kind of come out of this and have remote teams, or if you're managing a global team, which happens anyway. Then she talks about the importance of a group launch. Some of these you kind of already know, but you need to be reminded. A group launch, come together. What is our team going to do? How frequently are we going to meet? What is our schedule in this new remote time? Okay. And then reaching out, you have to schedule unscheduled time. So that's the awkward part. You need to do it. And again, I know we don't have a lot of time right now. So, but we're all here in this talk. So that's good. But this is part of, we're talking about getting those informal interactions. Reach out. Can we have a coffee? Can we have lunch over Zoom? Yes, it's awkward, but we need to do it. And you'll need to be doing that more and more with your remote work teams. And remember the skills you're developing now of working in this way and getting used to Zoom. I'm not one of those people who thinks that we're going to be on Zoom the rest of our lives, but we've figured out how to connect across the barriers, and everyone is going to be leveraging that at some point. So we'll be using these skills more and more. All right, that went a little long. I wanted to save time for question and answer, but that is my spiel. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll now open it up.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor. Very informative. We do have some questions in the chat, so I'll go ahead and read those off. The first one, you talked earlier a little bit about leadership tests. Would you maybe just be able to name a couple and where they could find them for those that aren't familiar?
Oh, so the Big 5 personality test, you'll be, just like if you look online, you'll be able to find it. I don't know if you have to, if it's behind a paywall, but the personality test will give you the personality, and then the situational leadership site I sent, it's just like Sims et al., but I can send you the article if you guys can't find it. If you look down like Google Scholar, you'll be able to find it. Situational leadership, they go through these different personality, how the leadership styles match with personality types.
Perfect. All right, next question is from Trevor. Is there generally a preferred style when you're entering into a leadership position in a new organization where you might not know the team before going in?
Yeah, okay. So not necessarily one of those styles I've told you, but something that psychological research shows is that it is better to start out less likable and become more likable. So people, if you start out super nice and then get tough, people like you less. If you start out tough, it's fine. If you start out tough and kind of scale back, that's better. So start more distance, more tough, and then kind of lean in, relax standards after you see what's going on. It will be harder to start easy, friendly, hey, I'm your friend, and then change that dynamic.
Awesome. Next question from Molly. Who are your current favorite women leaders contemporarily?
Well, Kamala Harris. Who's not? She's my favorite. Okay, so some political ones, I love Hillary Clinton too. She was like my favorites. They're both just very good at like navigating, exhibiting leadership and strength. In terms of in business, who are my favorite leaders right now in business? Women leaders. I mean, I used to love Sheryl Sandberg, but that stuff with Facebook was just, kind of undercut things. And then, I've been, following Sadal Neely, she's a professor, right? But I really appreciate her leadership, and some other people in my field, like Maggie Neal is, she's a negotiations professor. She just retired from Stanford, and she is like one of my big mentors and a leader for me. I'm trying to think of like CEOs and stuff, which I am kind of not thinking of anyone right now.
Okay. We have another question from Brooke. How do you balance having 2 different managers in different departments?
So that's tough. You should figure out which manager has the most clout. You know, so one of them's gonna be, it seems kind of instrumental, but like which one has the most clout, and then which one, so there's that, and then which one can help you go where you want to go. Right. So you know, as much as you can, you try to navigate both demands, but there's going to be some times when you can't. Also, I think put it back on them. So, you know, insist that you bring them both together. It's like, okay, here's the set of things I'm working on. What should I prioritize? Like, just I recommend this in any situation, just reflect, like hold up the mirror, reflect the facts back. So you're not doing something, you're just telling them so like, okay, my list has these 4 things on it. What should I prioritize, right? Things like that will help. But also figure out, like, you know, at some point you're gonna need to prioritize someone and figure out who you want that to be.
This is kind of an add-on to from Brooke. How do you manage being gaslighted or given non-answers to questions that are important to your work?
I would follow-up questions, continue to follow-up questions, and then hold up that mirror, right? Like, my advisor was very good at this. I listened, he had 6 kids, and he listened on the phone with the kids. The kids would be like, oh, you know, I'm trying to, like, they wanted to go to the ice cream store, they had to get back after dark, and he would never recognize what they wanted him to do was remove the boundary. But he would never do that, right? He was like, oh yeah, oh, I see the problem. So you want to go there with the friend, you have to be home by 6:30. Well, what if you do? And he would like kind of troubleshoot the problem, but never sort of like remove the 6:30 requirement. And so, okay, I'm telling you the stories because like if you're being gaslit, you just kind of keep restating your own reality and your own constraints. Like, well, but not like, but I need this. Be like, yeah, well, but this poses a problem to that. Like it's just an external constraint. Like, oh yeah, well, you know, this is the same thing with like prioritizing work. Like, so I've got 4 things to do, but there's time to really do 2 by Friday. Not I can only do, you know, just so this like externalizing of the constraints and the boundaries of what's going on. And so then that forces that person to deal with the reality or tries to. A good gaslighter is going to work around it. It's exhausting, but.
Yeah, this one a little bit maybe related to from Bree. She said, you mentioned taking initiative with responsibilities at the level you want to be at. I often find that as the only woman on my team, I get assigned more administrative tasks, which I worry prevents me from having the time to work on higher profile projects.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
how do we avoid getting so busy with busy work that we allow ourselves time to focus on these higher level activities?
I would address that a little, not quite head on, but say, well, you know, I've been assigned, like, I took on these tasks. I was hoping for this one. I was wondering if we could shuffle responsibilities. So don't just keep doing what people assign you. You're gonna have to take some initiative about what you want. Ideally before you get assigned. So maybe, I don't know what the specific situation, but when the next one comes up, if you could kind of come out in the front of it, like, you know, I was really hoping to do X, or, you know, I got assigned, like, I don't know how you pick. I had last choice these 4 weeks, or if none of that works, to really be like, you know, I've been, like, I really want to be, I'm a team player and I've been doing all of this and I really wanted to contribute. Like, I was very excited to contribute in this way, blah, blah. At this point, I was hoping to be able to take on this because I think I'll develop in this way and I think I can contribute in this way, you know, so really just sort of channeling why you want to do what you're doing. You know, the other thing is like make bad coffee, have sloppy handwriting, right? Like don't do those tasks really well.
Another question.
I don't know how to cook, you know what I mean? Like don't bake the cookies and bring them in. I like baking. You can in some places, but you know what I mean? Like just make sure like, oh, really? What? Oh, I'm sorry. Or, you know, you're supposed to be taking notes and then be like, oh, I forgot. Even just like, that's not the thing you're good at. I mean, you don't want to be a bad player, so you manage that. But if it really is sort of like busy work, focus on the thing that's going to get you ahead.
Another question from Brooke. Do you think it's important to have consistency in a leadership style?
I mean, it's important to have consistency. it's also important to be able to adjust to the situation. So what you don't, you've got to balance appropriately adjusting with, being inconsistent. So, you want what's important to the employees, like their reward system, to be consistent. You don't want them to feel like you're unpredictable, like your reactions are unpredictable, like you said one thing's important, all of a sudden something else is important. So you want there to be a stability. I mean, think about like parenting, that kind of, so like you want the kids to understand that this will be my reaction if you do something good or bad, or, something like that. But, so in the style, so like, yeah, if you're like empowering, then you turn aversive, those probably aren't like really complementary styles for you using the same person, but if the key is that if you need to change, you communicate why the change is necessary. Like, okay, look, this is happening. We're going to have to make a change, and this is going to happen. So you want your like interpersonal interaction to be as consistent as possible, but you might have to change the dynamic. That's a good question. A tough answer. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, a couple more questions. I'll probably round us out actually for the hour. Which of these leadership styles discussed are the most common and most followed by women leaders?
Well, probably not. Well, I actually don't know most common. I mean, most effective for women leaders would be, things that I actually am not sure. I mean, sometimes women leaders are like super aversive because they have to be, right? So I don't know. I don't know what research is in that. It's an interesting question. Part of the problem is that like, women are so different anyway, that sometimes you can pull off something, or sometimes you have this leadership style and maybe like a lot of effective women leaders aren't liked very well, so like that might work even though people don't, they're not popular. But I don't know if I know a good answer to that question.
Okay. Another one kind of relating back to Bree's question earlier about why women get saddled with admin work. At what point do you bail? Should you stay at all after recognizing the issue?
If you're burdened with administrative work?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't think it can be fixed and you've tried all your strategies and then you also should see what you're getting out of the position. Are you growing your career? Where is this taking you? Because if you're going to spend your life in this administrative position, that's not going to be good. So if you can move within the organization, if you could somehow can get out from beyond that manager, or if you're getting some kind of skills that you can leverage into, a different career. So I think it depends on the situation, on your options, and on how much you've exhausted the options. I mean, if you're really ready to leave, you could state that you find this gendered. Like that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like we all know the reaction is going to be strong, but that could be an option too. Say like, look, I'm the only woman on the team and you keep giving me this administrative work. Like you could eventually say that. That's going to cause a hullabaloo too, but sometimes you want to cause a hullabaloo. So
Mm-hmm. There's a couple more in here, Professor. I know it's right at 8, so.
Yeah, okay. We gotta get going. My son is gonna freak out.
Okay, we'll make it quick.
Putting him to bed. Oh.
Let's see. So do you have any ideas about how to shift perception among peers after being promoted? I find that my colleagues don't always take me seriously as I'm trying to grow.
I think that is similar to the first question. You've got to just get them used to the new situation. So there is research done. People get the most anxious. Matt Boffner did this research on like NASCAR drivers. They would get like the most aggressive when someone was just passing them, like their peer was just passing them. And so this is true for anyone. It will especially be true for women and for women of color, right? Their peer passed them and they're going to get anxious. You need to just set the new standard and just set it right away and be consistent, and they will get used to it. But I wouldn't apologize for it. You're the leader now. You might even actually, one good thing, I worked for a friend of mine. He was promoted early and he had an opening on his team, and I wanted to get off my team. This is when I was at MicroStrategy. We were peers, and I wanted to be on his team. And he was like, look, like I understand that we're at the same level and this is how I'm going to interact. So if it's a situation like that, you could actually have a conversation regardless. You could, acknowledge like, I understand that we used to be peers and now I'm, managing you, and I want you to know I respect XYZ. So make sure it's an honest conversation. If you are supposed to be the person's leader and you're not their peer anymore, don't say, I'm going to treat you like a peer, because you shouldn't, but you could still have an honest conversation. So I think it depends on the relationship, but that is definitely an option, and it can sometimes clear the air.
All right. I know we're a couple minutes past, so we'll wrap it up there. I'll hand it back to Samita. But thank you, Professor. Very informative and good questions from the group.
Questions?
Yep, thanks, Kristen, and thank you again, Professor Pontikes. For any questions we didn't catch, would you be open to having them sent to you, or they can email you? Is that okay?
Yes, please do.
Okay. And also, I sent out your reference page in the chat, and we'll also send it out after the meeting. And again, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you, Professor Pontikes, for giving us your insights on this very, very important topic. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you guys, and I'm really happy you're doing this club. This is exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.